Thank you very much. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be here. And Professor Vasser-san was so kind to remind me that my talk should have some relationships with the theme of the workshop. And fortunately, he gave me this kind reminder timely enough, half year or so ago, and I had enough time to think about this relationship. As you could see, I changed a little bit also the title of my presentation, because in the last half year I discovered things I wasn't aware about, and I thought it might be a good idea to include it in my presentation. And I will try to. The picture it's what I can present today. It's not entirely complete, and some of the ideas are still speculative and intriguing, at least to me, and some maybe provocative to some of you. And please apologize if they are too provocative. Be patient and take a deep breath and relax and come back afterwards through the presentation. The first thing I would like to introduce is from a Western point of view. The Western society and the Western culture is deeply influenced by religion, and in particular Christianity. And we have two major parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the New Testament was, as far as I can understand, introduced to compensate some shortcomings of the Old Testament in how to run in the society and culture. And the picture here is also introducing at the start. The Genesis, at the beginning of the Old Testament, we were in paradise or in the Garden of Eden, and we were happy, and nothing could happen to us unless we were taking our free choice given us by God to eat from the tree of knowledge, and that's what we did. And the consequence was something very substantial. The substantial part was we were thrown out of the paradise, and I guess, it's my personal opinion, we try our best to come back to paradise. Sometimes maybe we are not so straight ahead with this goal. On the right side, that is my account to Darwin here. H stands for animal, and H for human, and P for paradise, and non-P for non-paradise, it means something else, and D stands for Darwin. And the argument I try to put forward here is animals are still in paradise, and they are happy, and humans not, because according to the Genesis, we are thrown out, and we have to survive. And one of the major differences is, as far as I can judge, but I learned it's debatable that the humans also try to take over the environment, which is the environment in which we try to live and survive and change. And the next slide is the account of that. What we are doing is we are designing our own habitat, but as far as I could understand the discussion we had 2 days ago, or one night, animals are doing the same. But what we are also doing, and this is maybe something special, we are also trying to get influence on our genetic evolutionary process. And we have sperm banks, we are cloning, and we are developing genetic engineering to influence our own genome to achieve something. And the question is what? There is the problem, or the problem appears in the sense how we are capable to do so. And as far as I can judge, the only answer I could find is we are creating a symbolic knowledge space in which we are operating to communicate and share ideas and exchange ideas beyond time and space constraints. And this kind of conference or workshops are coming together is exactly that. It's to get deeper understanding, better understanding, how to operate and rule the world. There's some of the investigations in the sense is nature or nurture or so, in the sense how much space is for the phenotype, how much space is left, based on the fact that the phenotype is to a certain extent genetically determined, and twin studies give an answer to that. One of the recent publications here gives interesting results, and as far as I can judge, it's a little bit probably on the high end. If you include all the monozygotic twins and non-monozygotic twins, and if you're not excluding if they're living separate or not, then you're ending up with these kind of figures that about 70 to 80 or 90% even the phenotypical aspect I mentioned in this particular aspect is the intelligence quotient, or the IQ, genetically determined. Gives some space left for cultural issues, for phenotypical changes on top of it or next to it. Probably the real figure is somewhere below, I guess it's 50% or so, which is genetically determined, and the rest is open to education and society and development. To clarify one of the issues, from my point of view, information is a very fuzzy notion, and a lot of people using it in sometimes very different ways, and they mean something different. And it's hard to communicate. My interpretation personally is the concept of information nowadays has something like the status as the ether in physics 100 years ago. We try to understand, but we are not so close. What I want to put forward here is that you need on one side knowledge to understand the environment or whatever, the producer of the data, to interpret them, and if you interact with them, or if you get in connection with that, then information appears or emerges or starts to be available. But if you don't do so, then the knowledge can be separated from the data, and this is the way I would like to use the word, the concept information and knowledge. It started quite long ago, 500 years, when something what we are normally in the Western world supposed to be the scientific adventure or the academic course. It's going back to Copernicus, and Copernicus challenged the established way of finding the truth by interpreting the Bible. That was, at that point, the state of the art to find the truth, and Copernicus said, no, there must be something else, and he did empirical observations, and he observed, and he described, and draw conclusions which were not in line with the official way to interpret the proposed concepts written in the Bible. Galilei was a person he never met because he was born quite late, and he tried to bring it back into discussion by the famous book, the dialogue he was writing up, and to make it debatable. And from then on, what we are perceiving nowadays is science separated from religion, or our religion enterprise is established. At that point of time, René Descartes was one of the famous figures who wanted to protect the church against the attack from the upcoming scientists, and then he introduced a split. The split was res extensa and res cogitans, and he said, okay, Copernicus, look guys, res extensa is for you, but leave res cogitans for the church. And then everybody has his own way to look and to analyze, and there was some linking pin between that was God, where God could interact and pursue in both worlds, but from then on, at least in the Western world, I don't know how it's in Asia, we have something like a problem phrased normally as a mind-body problem. So we try to bring both together, but we are very difficult for us to do so. About 350 years later, a new attempt came up from two people, by Karl Popper and John Eccles. They introduced another split. So the res extensa was the same as the physical object and states and body and matter. Also this part, the macro world, this is up to the researchers. But then we have the individual, the state of the consciousness of the individual people, like us, and the world three of the knowledge in an objective sense. Also the results of our research should feed into these kind of worlds, and then the question is how do these three worlds interact with each other. And the split from Descartes was very clear. There was no communication possible, but the three worlds had a certain kind of possibility to exchange and to penetrate, to move forward ideas between them. Before I continue, there is an interesting literature in psychology from Nisbet and colleagues published 8 years ago about culture and systems of thought, holistic versus analytic cognition, where they compare Asian way of thinking versus Western way of thinking. And this was the main, one of the main results. There are more than these differences, but for my presentation, this is an important aspect. The Westerners are very strong, interested or characterized by analytical way of thinking. Reasoning tends to focus on objects and categories and is driven by formal logic. Try to be inconsistent in the Western world, particularly as a scientist. If you're immediately wrong, so you slaughter them, they kill you immediately. And the Eastern world has a closer, more holistic approach to view and to analyze or to describe phenomena, and the reasoning embraces contradictions among objects in a yin-yang constant chain. So the Asians are less, less afraid of, because they can transform it into the constant change process of the world, and in the Western world we are less open-minded to that. One strong mechanism is the reductionist and analytical point of view. It's a very powerful mechanism, and now in the way of communicating among like us here, Westerners invited to share Asians people and vice versa, we are trying to learn from each other. We try to utilize the good sides and the downsides from each other. So that brought me to the idea that probably knowledge can be also split in two different types of views, the particle view and the field view, in which how to look at. It's not the way, you can look in different ways, and sometimes it's only the debate what is the most practical or the most appropriate way. And for both I have good examples from other colleagues. The first one was the book from Dawkins, the selfish gene, where he introduced at the end, he didn't work it well out, but he introduced the concept meme. And the meme is something, the particular view of knowledge, in the sense any kind of idea which can pass through whatever kind of communication medium you're using. That's the particular view of knowledge, and the alternative then was introduced. There are different versions, but one of the most interesting one was the morphogenetic field from Robert Sheldrake, and he's a Westerner, he's I guess biologist or something like that in the UK, and when he started to address this idea 20 years ago, he was slaughtered by the community because it's for the Western world not really fashionable, not really attractive to think and reason in this way. And to put this idea a little bit forward, to combine both ideas, I had an animation, and the statement I found, it's the concept behind is actually a metaphor. A drop is in the ocean, that's the individual view, the particle view, and we don't know, also we neglect, and the ocean is also in the drop. So it's just a way to look at it. It doesn't make a difference, but it's a preference, a way to look at it. If we take the personal, the left ball is the division in different kinds of consciousness and unconsciousness part, and Jung introduced the collective unconscious part, which we all share with each other, but we are not normally aware about. We just live with that, and now here goes the animation. First, we put the ball over this map, and then we dive in. So we are tapping, and the idea is to tap into this kind of knowledge field without being aware of it. It's just taken for granted, and we are focusing more on the differences from the Western point of view. We differentiate each other, but we are paying not so much attention that we are pretty much the same. Is the idea is that there is some communication there possible? Is this a feasible idea or not? And there is some evidence for that, and I was very happy when I listened to Cynthia's presentation today. I didn't know that you would present something similar maybe. I couldn't get further than that. there was a paper written, a very famous one, yeah, by Einstein, Podolsky, and both, the EPR paradox, and the idea was to challenge the upcoming quantum mechanics theory at that point of time. And the thought experiment was if you have two different whatever particles or subatomic phenomena, for example, the thing I could understand was the electron. An electron in an orbit has two spins, and the spin is the opposite from each other. And if you take one of the electrons far away from the other electron, which was at that point of time obviously not feasible or so, but it was a good thought experiment, and then change the spin of the electron, what will the other electron do? Yeah? Is it changing immediately as well, or is it the statement, or the limitation introduced by Einstein was the communication between these two particles cannot go faster than light speed. And it took 50, 60 years or so when Bohm was one of the last PhD students of Albert Einstein, and he came with theoretical foundations, and Alan Aspect was, at least according to more people than that, he did the experiments to demonstrate that there must some synchronization takes place beyond light speed. And that's one of the accounts, and then the next one is
actually measure the emotional outpouring in a worldwide crisis. Sometimes scientists think that they have done just that. Their machines and computers found a bizarre pattern right after several global disasters.
Brendan Keefe explains this phenomenon. September 11th deeply affected people far beyond New York and Washington. The attack sent shockwaves around the world, a global reaction that triggered a spike in a network of scientific instruments, just like a seismograph during an earthquake.
Each of those showed a similar pattern of change during that day.
Retired Princeton scientist Dr. Roger Nelson believes the emotional focus of millions of people on a single event like 9/11 may form a global consciousness.
Does consciousness interact directly with the physical world?
To answer that question, Dr. Nelson and his colleagues deployed dozens of instruments around the world, random number generators. Basically, they're electronic coin flippers. Instead of heads or tails, each generates a 1 or a 0 200 times a second.
You can do that every second. At each of, now we have about 65 places around the world.
When truly random, the line of data wanders back and forth around 50-50 in a pattern the researchers call a drunkard's walk.
And at 9/11, it begins not being a drunkard's walk. It goes like this for a few days.
It may sound bizarre, but Dr. Nelson and his team have been at this for the better part of a decade. The first spike showed up in 1997 with the death of Princess Diana. Other events like the Concorde crash, the Madrid train bombing, and the Pope's funeral all registered on those random number generators. But early on the morning of September 11th, the data went off the charts.
We don't know how to explain it. It could happen by change, but the chance is like 1 billion in a moment. Some really large number.
How does it work, and what does it all mean? Even the scientists don't know. The implications go beyond science into philosophy and religion. All we know is this: at this very moment, around the globe, the random number generators keep flipping those virtual coins, waiting to record our collective reaction to the next major world event. At Princeton, Brendan Keefe, CBS 2 News.
okay. Did anybody know about that or heard about it? No? Okay, first time you were... Okay. The official version is just not relevant at all. So that's the standard answer from established scientists, and there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe they can measure something we are not aware about, and gives at least people like me some hope that certain kind of research or whatever makes sense. The remaining question is if there is something that's possible and it can be also measured with this kind of approach to a certain extent. We don't know what it is. It's still very speculative. Then the question comes back, how does it relate to the human being? And how does this a mechanism which connects the quantum world with the biostructure of human beings, the phenotype. And throughout my literature search, I found the work of Pengros and Amorov. Someone heard about that at least? Or, okay, Pengros is pretty well known, I guess, in the New Emperor's World. The book was also very influential. And they propose the idea of that the microtubuli have this kind of possibility to connect the quantum world with the biological structure of a human being. And that would be a possibility to explain certain phenomena we could not explain easily otherwise. Let's phrase it like that. Based on that, and some other conditions I'm not disclosing here, but I was challenged by coming up with something interesting which can contribute to this research line to find out whether or not this is feasible. And then I phrased it because I'm working at the Technical University in Eindhoven, and I'm surrounded by a lot of engineering disciplines, and the engineers say, okay, what do you have? And then physicists say, okay, we have all cyclotron. Okay, then I will build the cyclotron for the mind. And then the question was how to do so, and the answer was not as simple or not as obvious. It's an interactive mixed reality installation based on a narrative, and it took us a while to identify that, and the narrative we identified, which characterized the Western world pretty good without being religious. That was one of the bottlenecks, or one of the constraints I introduced was the narrative Alice Adventures in Wonderland, and because he wrote this narrative to explain our world, what we take for granted, and he created a world which is different, significantly different from our perception and our experience living in our world. And based on that, we started to play safe. From my side was to avoid any kind of going further in the direction of religion, because if I would do so, I would have more problem than I have already. Let's phrase it like that. So when I got someone from Microsoft Research, I went back to my university, I said, okay, I have an idea, I have some money, I need space. And then university space, we don't have space. Okay. Not for our department, of course, for mechanical engineering. I'm working at the Department of Industrial Design, and we don't get this kind of infrastructure, but the other departments get. Luckily, there was something, the building you see here was a building, a huge building for mechanical engineering, for the prototype installation and so forth, and they don't use it anymore. The building was planned to be demolished, and then I said, okay, everybody wanted to get out, and I said, okay, that's I have plenty of space, I go in, and then after a while, a couple of years, we have to move, and that's what we are actually doing right now. We got space. Space was something like that, 12 by 7 meter, and we filled it up with interactive installation. And we picked certain aspects from the narrative. That was the beginning of the narrative. Is Alice is waiting in a park scene, and then we built the park scene, and the robot which passed by. I will show you later the short video which explains it much better than I do. And then the next one was down the rabbit hole. We had a long discussion how to bring people safe down a couple of meters, and there was a lot of very interesting ideas. And at the end, we came up with the stair lift for elderly people. It's a product you can buy at the market. You set them on the chair, you bind them, and then journey goes on. And the underworld, the first thing Alice encounters is the world where you play with the body size. And of course, we cannot change the physical body size, but you can trick the perception. So what we built a virtual reality cave, and we put two elements in the cave, eat me and drink me, and if you eat the cookie, you are growing, and if you drink, you shrink, or otherwise round, and we measure how much was eaten by the test subject, and then we trick the perception, so the size of the room will be changed. And then you leave this cave, and then you're small, very small, like 10 centimeter. You should be and then you encounter the caterpillar, and the caterpillar challenge your self-concept. So the first question the caterpillar is addressing to you, who are you? And this is something what we also got. That's the only thing I can, the effect of the caterpillar, we could measure in an empirical sense with experiments, that the effect is in the direction of the hypothesized idea to make people less confident about their concept of the individual. And the last one was the Cheshire Cat. The Cheshire Cat is mainly addressing the dialogue, the logical reasoning, because she takes it to the extreme. And if you only try to reason in a logical way without taking certain aspects of the context into account, sometimes it's paradox again. And that's the project, and I will show you a short video.
Industrial design, we are exploring a new application of virtual and augmented reality for a novel direction in human-computer interaction named cultural computing. The main objective of the ALICE project is to create an interactive installation that encourages people in Western culture to reflect on themselves based on the narrative of Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, which addresses issues such as logic, rationality, and self. The ALICE installation was built inside of a building at the Idaho University of Technology, which takes a space of 12 by 12 meters, spanning 2 floors over a total height of 7 meters. In the first scene of Carol's original book, Alice is bored and sleepy, sitting on a bench with her sister. A white rabbit runs close by her, and while looking at his pocket watch, it cries out, oh dear, I shall be late." The visitor of the Alice installation enters this stage through 2 curtains. Inside, a 360-degree panorama picture of Oxford surrounds the visitor, the place where Carol lived and worked. The visitor has to wait until he is bored, and thereby enters a similar state of mind as Alice in the original book. Then, a white rabbit appears from behind the curtain. It has a pocket watch and says through its internal speakers, oh dear, I shall be late." On its way to the rabbit hole at the far end of the room, it passes the visitor. It tries to seduce the visitor to follow by starting a catch-me-if-you-can type of behavior. The rabbit enters a hidden section inside of the rabbit hole before the visitor enters the hole and hence disappears from sight. The visitor enters the rabbit hole after the rabbit and thereby enters stage 2. Alice falls down the rabbit hole in an unusual fashion. The speed of her fall is very slow, and she is able to interact with objects that are attached to the walls of the rabbit hole, such as cupboards and bookshelves. When entering the rabbit hole in the Alice installation, the visitor finds an electric seat that is mounted on a rail. Once safely seated, the seat takes the visitor down a tunnel in a spiral movement. Along the walls of the tunnel, cupboards, bookshelves, and lamps are mounted. Alice enters the dark corridor with many doors. She approaches a glass table on which a small golden key lays. She uses the key to open a tiny door that leads to a garden, but Alice is too tall to enter. She approaches the table again, and this time she notices a bottle labeled "Drink Me," and later a little cake labeled "Eat Me." By drinking from the bottle, she shrinks, and by eating the cake, she grows. Eventually, she manages to have the appropriate size to enter the tiny door. The visitor enters the cave and has the impression to stand in a virtual room. A cookie box labeled "Eat."
My apologies, the battery is running out of power, I guess. Thank you very much for your kind attention.